Hi, I'm Jason, a content manager at InfluxDB.
And I'm Zoe Steinkamp, a developer advocate at InfluxDB.
And today we're going to be talking about the Node.js client library. So Zoe, first question to you is, what exactly is the Node.js client library?
Yeah, so at Influx, we have a few different client libraries available in a multitude of popular programming languages. Our Node.js client is specifically built to be used in Node, browser, and Dino environments.
Okay.
It's really straightforward to get up and set up and install, and that's what we're here to talk about today.
Okay, well maybe you can, I see you've got some stuff here, maybe you can run us through how to install and set it up.
Yeah, so it's pretty straightforward here, but basically we have one option. You can install it inside of a Node app, or you can install it inside of a TypeScript Node app. Just a FYI, most of our GitHub examples are going to be TypeScript based. The other thing that comes with the setup, this is pretty straightforward. Once you have everything installed, you're just going to go ahead and import that InfluxDB endpoint from those libraries, and you're just going to call them down here and pass in these two credentials. Now, your credentials are what you get from the InfluxDB interface or UI or command line, but basically it's going to be your URL, your token, your organization, and the bucket of which you want to either send data up into or query back out of. And one thing to note is do put these inside of a secret file or some kind of file not right here. You don't want these credentials leaking themselves all over the GitHub interwebs.
Yes, that would not be good. All right, so if I'm going to use the Node.js client library, what kind of features can I expect to get out of it?
Yeah, so it has a few unique features for this library. The first one being the default tag, which will allow you to put a default tag on all of your measurement points. This is great, for example, if all your data is coming from the same location, you could put a tag for that. It's static and doesn't change, so it's perfect for that feature. Another one we offer is buffer optimization, which allows you to do large buffer requests. So if you have a large data set, that'd be great for that. And finally, another thing that we do is failure retry. So if your data fails to go up successfully, it'll keep retrying for a bit to try to get that data ingested.
All right, so we've talked about install and setup. I know writing and querying data is a big part of this, so maybe you can walk us through how to write data with the client library.
Yeah, so I've got up some code examples here, which are pretty straightforward, but basically from the InfluxDB client library, you can call the write API. And what the write API requires is just your org and bucket. From there, you can actually start to use that one feature that I already mentioned, which is the default tags. For this one, we've set the region to West, and this data never leaves the West, so it's a perfect static tag to add.
Okay.
Now, what you're going to do is, for that data, you're going to create a point. So for this point, we have temperature, and we've set a tag and a float field. The tag is the sensor ID, and the float field is the actual value of the temperature. Hopefully this is Fahrenheit. But from there, we call the write API, and we start to write up the points. Now, obviously, this could be in a loop of some sort, so you can write multiple data points. But this is a great little example of how you would write data up to InfluxDB with the client library.
Great, so that's getting data in, getting it written to the database, and we want to get data out, we can query it. What does that look like?
So when you want to query that data back out, the first thing you're going to do is call for the query API. It's again going to take some parameters like a URL and token, and specifically we're going to be querying rows. So rows are just the columns of data. So one thing to note here is we have to give it a Flux query, which is the query that I'll go into in a second, and then a Flux observer is just a loop that basically is going to request a certain amount of rows. Flux is InfluxDB's querying language. So what that means is you use this to query the data back out of Influx. So specifically here, we've asked for the data to come from the bucket air sensor. We've given it a range of how far back we'd like that data to come from, and we're filtering down to only get the measurement that equals temperature. So in case our DB had other measurements, maybe that would be something like humidity, we don't want that data, we just want the temperature. Now obviously Flux queries could be much bigger, much more in depth, we could filter down a lot more, or they could be very simple. You could just put from bucket, give me the data.
So I know one of the unique characteristics of time series data is that we actually delete it from the database. So how do we do that with the client library?
Yeah, so from the client library, you can call the delete functionality, and all it asks is that you give it a bucket that you want to delete the data from and a time interval. Now that time interval can be something like 24 hours or 5 minutes, but it couldn't be anything like only delete the measurements of temperature. If you want to do something like that, you would need to use a Flux task instead. Okay.
Now let's say I've got a distributed network, I've got InfluxDB instances all over the place, and I want to make sure that they're all functioning properly. Can I use the client library to do that?
Yes, so we actually have an API available that the client library can call upon that will basically give you a full list of all your InfluxDB instances. And in that list, it will say whether or not they are running successfully or not so running successfully.
And that's the Ping API?
That's correct, the Ping API.
All right, excellent. So a lot of great resources here. Are there any other resources that you can suggest people check out if they're going to get involved with this client library?
Yeah, so our JavaScript client library has over 20 plus examples on how to do some of the features I talked about earlier, some of these features, and I definitely suggest you go check it out. It's a good resource.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the tips and thanks for the walkthrough here. Hopefully that's useful for you as well, and we can't wait to see what you build.